Hi there, and welcome to Roth and Aggie Reviews. I'm Kobe. Today we're going to be reviewing a film series called The Last Exorcism series. These are found footage films. Well, actually, first part of the series is a found footage. Second is not. And I say that right off the bat because this is going to play a key role in the reviewing of the two movies, which are Last Exorcism 1 and Last Exorcism 2. So, what are the stories about? The first story in the first movie is about this guy named Connor Marcus, who is an exorcist, and he's been doing exorcisms for like virtually his whole life. I mean, it's something that he was. It was a family tradition. His dad was like a preacher, a Baptist preacher, and then Connor Marcus took over the throne, so to speak, or for lack of a better word. Basically the movie is it starts off with a documentary about the art or the science behind exorcisms and preaching and things like that. So Connor Marcus right off the bat is sort of trying to make well, he's not making it look. He actually doesn't seem to be that religious. In the movie, in the beginning of the movie, he really says, he gives a couple of examples that the movie will say. I don't want to spoil them. Gives a couple of examples of how he really has more faith in science and technology and things like that as opposed to religion. Really shows that he's sort of doing a job that he's not. It's not that he doesn't love it or doesn't like it. It's just that he doesn't really believe it. It's quite visible that he enjoys the job he does, whether it's preaching or doing an exorcism. Like, he really enjoys the job, but he doesn't really believe in that stuff. So the documentary's sort of trying to show how easy it is to do these kind of like things in their opinion. And Connor Marcus right off the beginning says that in this documentary, in the movie, he's trying to say what a scam this whole thing is and everything. And so basically some documentary members are saying that he was committing fraud, and then he says, well, he kind of explains himself and says that it was almost like a social work type thing where he was, alleviating people of the spirit that, they thought was bugging them. So I guess he's trying to like kind of take advantage of people's, imagination and then make a profit from it. So yeah, it starts out being quite funny, the documentary, but there's a couple of key points in the documentary that, in the movie, very early on, that kind of show, the seriousness of the subject that the movie's focused on, which are, exorcisms and stuff like that. So then he gets, a couple of letters from the exorcism, from people who are looking for exorcists, and he chooses one that ultimately is the actual case of the movie, and it turns out to be this girl who does these weird things at night, and the parents need an exorcist and things like that. So I'm not going to get really into depth with that. I'm just going to say that the movie, for those of you who've watched it, I think most people who've watched the first part really liked it. I mean, it was one of those films that was found footage. It was done, 2010 or 2010, and even though there were movies like Paranormal Activity and Blair Witch Project and Cannibal Holocaust before it that, kind of had their charm, this movie really captured something in the, really captured the art of found footage. I mean, the audience really appreciated that, and it's one of those films that, is not really on the... I would, in my opinion, it is technically one of the best found footage horror films. Now, a lot of people, would classify, Blair Witch Project and Paranormal Activity as being the best. I would say that, along with Cannibal Holocaust, which is a little obscure, and Last Exorcism, which was later, I would say, Cannibal Holocaust and Last Exorcism Part 1 really make it on the four, best found footage films, horror found footage films. I just feel that the movie captures the essence, the suspense, and the spirit behind, found footage, and it actually is more scary than funny. I mean, the movie opens up being funny, like a lot of horror films do, but then as a found footage film should do in the horror genre. It ends in a terrifying way. So I like that. Okay, so people who've seen the first part, I'm not gonna go into the talking about the story because we all know the story. We can all say how clever it is because it really has a good twist. And for those of people who are just looked up, Last Exorcism series, I won't spoil it now. I'm not even gonna spoil it later on. Although when I get into part two, I probably will, include some spoilers. So before I get into part two, I'm gonna give a heads up for people to switch off in case they haven't seen the Last Exorcism movies yet. So yes, the movie has such a good twist, and the acting is great. The mythology in the movie is fantastic. It really, once you learn about who the demon is and what the name is, and you look it up in Google, and you really think that there is there are these other stories behind it. It really, I feel that if this movie was done, let's say, like 1996, 97, before Blair Witch, like that movie would have been like, whoa, 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 like it would have been all over the place. It would have had probably the same attention, or possibly, very possibly more attention than the Blair Witch, just because of how realistic and scary this movie seemed. But yeah, of course, this movie was made in 2010, so 11 years later on, 11 years later, and obviously people kind of were aware of marketing and things like that. So yeah, the first part was great. It had this fantastic found footage feel, and the story just went along so well. It was just great. So okay, now I'm gonna get into part two of Last Exorcism Part 2, and yeah, I'm gonna, for people who haven't seen either film, the first and the second parts, and don't want a spoiler, I suggest you leave right now because I will be revealing some parts from Part 2, some key points that do reveal the spoiler. So I hope you guys leave and check it out. It's really worth checking both films out, and good luck with how with the scares. Okay, so I'll do like a 1, 2, 3 count. In case people in the spoilers haven't left yet. So yeah, if you haven't seen the movies yet and you don't want a spoiler, then and you don't want a spoiler, you should leave right now and just check the movie out. Okay, so now let's get up to part two. Part two of Last Exorcism. Last Exorcism Part 2. It was exactly like the Blair Witch Project Part 2, the Book of Shadows. It just didn't have the found footage aspect. The story kind of went in many different ways, and it was one of those movies that really relied on the art of a sequel, right? And if a sequel is not done well, it just really then makes the first part look badly, which is a extremely big shame because then the first part suffers. So even though I liked the part, at Last Exorcism Part 2, I liked it. I mean, the first one was, my opinion, not that it was way better, but I just was really into it more for some reason. But as people have said, the second part was not as good as the first part. They felt that way, and I feel the reasons for that were basically the found footage aspect was gone, and I think it was a bit too staged in some ways. I think the authenticity and the ambiguity of certain things was just kind of dissolved and maybe ruined for some people. I think those two things were kind of like really the key things that really destroyed Part 2. But see, with Part 2, you can look at it a couple ways because the one way you can look at it is so the found footage aspect, and the scares were staged, and they were it was more like you could expect things, but then you could kind of look at it the other way. It had this really cool aspect of her going to this festival, and the visual scares were really really almost artistic and poetic and very nicely done, even though they were bloody terrifying. But it's all how you look at it. But because the first film was a found footage movie, I do feel that some people were really kind of disappointed by the fact it wasn't. And I know I talk about this a lot right now, but it's important to keep in mind that some people, some types of audiences, want a sequel to have the big charm of the first one in it. It's just, I think, how it is. I think that's how movies work and how the audience works. Surprisingly, there wasn't a third part. A lot of people were saying that the second part just made it impossible for there to be a third part. Now, is that because there was no place for a story, or because people just didn't want to continue watching the films? I don't know. But I say you check the movies out a couple of times, because these movies, I've watched the first one a couple of times. Second one, I've probably only watched once. But these are the kind of movies that you can watch many times, and the first one is just so funny. It's like hilarious. So on that note, I'm gonna pause. I'm gonna stop right now. Hope you guys enjoyed this review. All the best, and bye bye.